When one goes around institutions today, let's say schools and corporations, one cannot help but notice that there's a lot of values or virtues that are advertised on posters, on mission statements, on strategic plans. Values like excellence, courage, perseverance, resilience, even mindfulness, equanimity. What are we to do with all these values? Do we take them seriously? We don't take them seriously. I think we're all kind of a bit suspicious, but on the other hand, sometimes enthusiastic about these values. So, what's the story? I think the first thing to notice is that these values don't guarantee good behavior. Um, if we look, for example, at, let me read you the following passage. For one person, work is a curse, God's punishment, a burden that one should remove as rapidly as possible. For another, it is a necessary part of existence that gives human life its meaning. For one, bravery and loyalty are nothing but great stupidity. He would rather be a coward for a few minutes than to be dead for the rest of one's life. For another, bravery and loyalty are the characteristics used to value and esteem people. He holds to his word in good and times and ill. He cannot live without honor and would rather die than be a coward. So we all appreciate courage. This might be a bit over the top, but we appreciate both courage and hard work. And we would be surprised to learn that this is from taken from a brochure of the Hitlerjugend. Um, but if we look at other people, for example, Japanese imperialists, kamikaze fighters, you'll see values that are very recognizable for us, like equanimity, mindfulness. If we look at tobacco companies or oil companies, you'll sense a culture of zero, being very, very careful, a culture of zero accidents, or exactly the same values, excellence, and so forth. So we know that values can't guarantee good behavior. I think that thoughtful people from the beginning started to think that there's something suspicious about virtues and values. Socrates went around Athens, and this was the society most geared around virtues. There were 5 virtues in ancient Greece, and they were embodied in the stories of Homer. And people were supposed to have all these values or aspire to having all these values. And Socrates went around them and asked them for the definition. What is courage? What is justice? What is piety? What is temperance? And he didn't get good answers from them. And he all the time kind of poked them to compare these virtues to crafts, techna in ancient Greece. He compared it to being a carpenter, a potter, a doctor. And what he liked about these crafts is that they have a kind of procedure, a praxis, which leads to some social utility. So if you know how to be a shoemaker, you have a certain skill that leads to a social good. And he didn't sense that with the virtues. The virtues did not seem to guarantee some social good. Many people who did actually bad things for the state claimed to be virtuous, and it wasn't clear that people who claimed to be virtuous were virtuous or did anything good for the state. So he was very suspicious. Another person who was very suspicious was Kant. Kant was also suspicious regarding the relationship between virtues and what is good. He writes wonderfully, I think, in his groundwork for the critique of moral. Moderation in affects and passions, self-control and calm reflections are not only good for all sorts of purposes, but even seem to constitute a part of the inner worth of a person. But they lack much that would be required to declare them good without limitation. However unconditionally they were praised by the ancients. For without the basic principles of goodwill, they would become extremely evil. And the coolness of the scoundrel makes him not only far more dangerous, but also immediately more abominable in the eyes than we would have taken him to be without it. So, like those Nazi films where you see it like the villain is very courageous, very efficacious. He can do a lot of things, very level-headed. Um, Kant reminds us that a lot of what we would consider virtues can be combined with ill will, with doing bad to other people, efficiency, etc., of the Nazis, for example. So that was Kant's brief with the virtues. Perhaps two more thoughtful people, Marx and Freud. Marx was didn't deal directly with the virtues, but it was clear to him that the virtues of work, being able to work hard, will not provide you with so work generates value. I agreed with that. He had a labor theory of value, but this value is taken away from you. So when bourgeois society advertises work, it advertises something which is deceptive, because the value of work is usually sucked up and exploited, moves above. So it's a kind of like a false virtue. It's not really, won't really help you to be a good worker in a capitalist society. You won't get rewarded. You will simply be taken as something that is obvious that you can take for granted. Freud had another critique of virtue. He said the virtues, where do they come from? He thinks that the virtues come from being weak inside the family. So as a child you were maybe you had more desires to be with your mother, to have exclusivity over her, and your father got mad at this, but your father is very powerful. In general, your father is very powerful and scary. And in order not to confront him, you decided to simply take his point of view, decided to internalize your father's values and virtues. So this is what you think of as virtues and values are actually something that you took simply because you were in a politically weak position. So I think that to summarize, I think that virtues and values are disembodied. We always have to look at their context within society and within a political system. What do they do? What are their consequences? And where do they come from? How were they created?